What France has done has said it is going to suspend the delivery of the first of 2 warships which it's contracted to build for the Russians. The first ship, called the Vladivostok, was due to be delivered by the end of October to the Russian Navy, with the second ship due to be delivered in the middle of next year. What President Hollande has said is that under the current circumstances, given Russian actions in Ukraine, he is no longer going to authorize the delivery of the first ship unless circumstances change. That means that the French are not cancelling the contract, but they are saying they are suspending it in the hope, of course, that the Russians will come to some agreement with Ukraine, that there will be a ceasefire. It's an extremely important contract for the French. It's worth 1.2 billion euros. It supports 1,000 jobs in the shipbuilding industry, and particularly the naval shipbuilding industry, which has been under a huge amount of pressure in recent years with spending cuts around the Western countries in defense spending. It's also 1,000 jobs that are in a sensitive part of France, in Brittany, where jobs are scarce. The other concern the French have is that if they are seen to renege on a contract such as this, it could have a snowball effect on other international contracts with other countries that are buying French arms. I think after the events of the past week, in which Russia has apparently been intervening to some degree directly in East Ukraine, that the French had no choice but to make some kind of move here, at least a gesture on these contracts, which have been very controversial in the eyes of the Americans and France's NATO allies, particularly in Eastern Europe. There's been something of a mixed reaction in France. I think in the political mainstream, there's pretty much been an acceptance that the government didn't really have too much choice here, although there is some concern. But particularly on the right wing, where there is, on the extreme right wing, the National Front party of Marine Le Pen has been extremely critical. They have always been quite supportive of Russian President Vladimir Putin's policies in Ukraine, and they have attacked the government very sharply on this, and of course said that it could cost thousands of jobs. So there is a political price to pay here, potentially, for President Hollande if the contract does not go ahead. The decision was immediately welcomed by the United States, which had been pressing France to do something like this for some months, and definitely took the pressure off President Hollande as he went into the summit meeting in Wales with his own allies. And that has given him a breathing space. But the question is now, what happens on the ground in Ukraine? If the fighting goes ahead, if it is seen that the Russians are not taking the right steps as demanded by Ukraine and as demanded by the NATO allies and the European Union to cease supporting the separatist rebels in East Ukraine, then it's going to be very tricky for the French. What French officials in Paris are saying is that they want to go ahead with this contract. If the Russians do the right thing, the first ship could be supplied as early as the end of October, November, but everything will now depend on what happens on the ground in Ukraine.